So today we have a few cancellations to dole out, and it all begins with this question sent into Slate's advice column. Now, anybody who sends a question to Slate's advice column deserves to be canceled on that basis alone. I cannot imagine ever facing a quandary in my life where I think to myself, man, Slate might know what to do here. I have never been in a situation where I wondered what Slate might say about it. And that's mostly because I know what Slate would say. They'd say that the cause of the problem is racism, sexism, and transphobia. Literally, no matter what the problem actually is. The problem could be like a flat tire or arthritis or anything, and that would be Slate's answer. But this guy, who uses the pseudonym Suddenly the Breadwinner, thought that Slate would be the best place to go with his issue, and here's what he wrote. It's a little bit long, but let's read the whole thing. Bear with me. He says, I am a new father to a beautiful 10-month-old girl. My wife's company has a generous maternity leave policy, and she has been at home with our daughter since the birth and is scheduled to go back to work just after her first birthday in January. She recently told me she doesn't want to go back to her job and would like to be a stay-at-home parent instead. I asked her why, and she said she enjoys being a mother too much to leave our daughter to go back to work when she doesn't need to. It's such a departure from our plans before the baby was born. She had a good job that she enjoyed before going on leave and had always been adamant that she wanted to continue working even after becoming a mom. We met when we worked at the same company many years ago, and one of the things I was most attracted to about her was her ambition and tenacity. It's really surprising to hear that her career isn't that important to her anymore. Honestly, I don't want her to quit her job. She earns about the same as I do, and while we could make ends meet on my income alone, it would impact our daily ability or our ability to save, and we need to give up one of our cars and cut back on extras that make life more enjoyable. I also just don't want a stay-at-home mom wife. I really admired my wife for her work ethic, and I want her to set a good example for our daughter, too. Seeing her give up like this is really disappointing. I gently asked her if she thought her change in attitude could be related to a possible mental health issue or postpartum depression, but she didn't take that well. She says she only cares about our daughter, and that's where all her energy needs to go right now, and that if I love her, I will let her do this. I do love my wife, and I'm not interested in divorce, but I'm seeing a whole side of her that I just don't like or admire. What should I do? Okay, well, as long as he gently asked whether his wife wants to stay home and raise their daughter due to a mental illness. Hey, honey, listen, I know you said you love being a mother and you want to be home with our child full time. I'm just wondering, are you having a psychotic break? Is that what this is? I'm only asking. What? I'm just asking. I can't believe that didn't go over well. Now, I admit that I might be judging this man extra harshly because I am also the breadwinner in my family, and we have 4 little mouths to feed instead of 1. And I personally really like supporting my family. I feel honored to do it, fulfilled by it. And I love that my kids have their mom home with them. The idea of being disappointed about being the breadwinner as a man is completely foreign to me. The idea of respecting and admiring your wife less because she loves being a mom too much is also utterly foreign to me. But we'll respond more to these ideas in a second. First, let's loop in our dear friend Jill Filopovic. She's a feminist writer who always has exactly the sort of take you would expect on these kinds of issues. In a series of tweets, she responded empathizing with the man, and empathizing with men is usually not one of her strong suits. And she said in part, quote, I realize this is like the third rail of the mommy wars, but yeah, lots of super ambitious people marry other super ambitious people because they're attracted to ambition. I would have a really, really hard time being married to a spouse who chose not to work. And now I'm really going to get myself yelled at, but I also think the issue of example setting for a kid is totally fair. What example are you setting when dad works for pay and mom does the care work at home? Lots of reasons not to want to set that kind of example for a child. At-home work is incredibly isolating. It also occupies a pretty unique space where it's centered on one of the most fundamental familial relationships, parent/child. No other job is like that, which is where the claim that staying at home is a job doesn't quite tell the whole story. Okay, now, there's a lot to be said on this topic. We don't have time to say most of it. Instead, I just want to focus on 2 things. Maybe not even the 2 most important things, but these 2 things. First, the idea that you have to choose between being ambitious or raising your children full time is asinine. Ambition, in the positive sense of the word, is simply a strong desire to achieve some kind of worthwhile goal coupled with the determination to see it through. That's what we mean when we speak positively about an ambitious person. Raising children and tending to your family and your home requires a lot of ambition. Or to put it another way, there's a big difference between children who are raised ambitiously and children who are not. So to have ambition as a parent is to be active, to be present, not complacent. Here's a very simple example of ambitious parenting. And this, again, is by far not the most profound example, but as I said, a simple, everyday example. An ambitious parent turns the TV off, says to the kids, hey, let's go outside and play a game. Let's have a scavenger hunt. Let's do some activity that I have planned. Some edifying and educational and fun activity that I have planned that we're going to go do, rather than just having you sit here and watch TV all day. Now, this is not necessarily the parent's idea of a good time, but it's good for the kids in the long run. And you're putting the work and effort in pursuit of that long-term benefit, rather than simply letting them watch TV and play video games all day. At the end of the day, as a parent, you know if you parented ambitiously or not. And you may be more worn out after the day of ambitious parenting, but there's also a deep fulfillment that you feel from it. And I would submit that in many cases, parenting provides more chances to have that kind of feeling, that sort of satisfied, tired feeling of knowing you put a hard day's work in and you were ambitious and, and proactive. Parenting provides more opportunities to feel that way than a 9-to-5 job does. In many 9-to-5 jobs, the structure is already laid out. Your function is limited. Ambition doesn't even come into play most of the time. There isn't much room to set your own path. As a parent, there is no structure but what you put in place. There is no plan but what you devise. And if you don't put a structure in place, if you have no plan, if you don't do anything, if you just let the days flow by, counting on the glowing screens to keep your kids distracted, sure, you're going to feel totally empty, alone, bored, and miserable. But that's where ambition comes into play. Second point. No, being a stay-at-home mom is not a job. It's not. A job is something you get specifically paid to do. Many jobs require you to punch in and punch out. You might even get a name tag. Parenting involves none of that. It's not a job, but it is work. Okay, that's the distinction here. A job is just a type of work. Being a stay-at-home mom is not a job, but it is a type of work. Running a self-sustaining farm is also not a job, but it's definitely work. The real question is whether a job is a more noble, more worthwhile, more important kind of work than parenting. And the answer to that is obviously no. Not all jobs are created equal. Some jobs are more important than others, just as not all parents are created equal. Some parents are better than others. But speaking in broad strokes here, working for a wage at the behest of a large company under the supervision of bosses and managers is not some kind of noble romantic thing. It's also not liberating. The idea that a woman is liberated from the servile bonds of motherhood by becoming a wage slave for a corporation is frankly ridiculous. Nothing wrong with working a job. I do it. Somebody in the family's got to do it. But let's not delude ourselves about the nature of what we're doing at our jobs. Here's the other tough reality. You are replaceable at your job. Totally replaceable. We all are. Your value to your employer is entirely based on how well you perform. If they can find someone who performs better than you, you go from limited value to no value. And either way, once you exit one way or another, whether you leave on your own or are fired, the hole you leave behind will be filled and you'll be quickly forgotten. That's what it means to work at a job. It means that your worth is quantified in dollars and cents. It means that whatever you do, you're only doing it because, and so long as, you're given money in return. And there's nothing fundamentally wrong with any of this. As I said, someone's got to do it. But it's hard to see this as somehow more admirable than full-time parenting. Jobs are mercenary. Jobs are temporal. Jobs are revolving doors. Parenting is none of that, or at least it shouldn't be. Which is why, even though I have a job, I find my real worth and value at home with my family, because that's what really matters. And even if you don't have a family, you still better find your worth and value somewhere else. You better find some deeper, more meaningful thing to find your worth and value in than your job. That's the case for everybody. And so parents who do this full time, incredibly worthwhile and valuable thing. People who can't see that, like our friend Jill and the guy who wrote that letter, are, of course, canceled. Well, I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Matt Walsh Show. If you did, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right down there so you can stay up to date on all of our future content.